Welcome to Corran on the Horn. Today we've got another interview with another world champion. Brandon Schele was the 2004 Star Wars CCG world champion. He was also involved with design in the mid to late 2000s and has a bit of a controversial reputation. When listening to this interview, I would encourage you to hear things from Brandon's perspective. However, this interview is not meant as an endorsement nor as a criticism of his actions or opinions, aside from the fact that I think a lot of people, myself included, were jerks on the internet in the early 2000s. Corran on the Horn. I'm here with Brandon Schele, world champion from
Schele.
Schele. I've never heard it said out loud. I'm sorry. Brandon Schele, and I appreciate you correcting me. Back in the day, I did a Magic the Gathering podcast, and we had a guest on that wrote for the magicthegathering.com, and it was the first time that I had interviewed somebody that was not that he was famous, but kind of the next tier up. His name was Bruce Richard. I called him Bruce Richard for the entire interview. And then after I hit stop, he says it's pronounced Richard. So Brandon Schele, I apologize for mispronouncing your name. And I will remember it when I interviewed Phil Austin. He corrected me, and then I still pronounced his name wrong for the whole episode. So I'll be good on this. So how'd you get started with Star Wars CCG?
Oh man. So I was middle school or high school. My brother and his friend were buying the cards and playing the game, and I was like, hey, that looks interesting. That looks more complex than Magic and more interesting than that. And Star Wars is okay. I wasn't a huge Star Wars fan, to be honest, at the time. And so I started buying cards and trying to learn how to play with both my brothers and some friends and stuff like that. And then eventually went to my first tournament.
Sounds like a pretty typical story. What around what sets were out, or what era was it when you were getting started?
Yeah, I think I want to say it was Cloud City, Jabba's Palace is when I first started buying. Okay. And Special Edition, all around there. And then I want to say the first tournament I went to was shortly after Special Edition.
Okay. It was shortly after Special Edition. Was it do you remember if it was before or after Operative Errata, or was it all operatives?
It was, I want to say it was before the Operative Errata, but only one tournament before that, and then
okay.
And then everything after that was Errata and stuff like that. I didn't play in many tournaments until I want to say post Death Star 2 set, and that was when I started playing a bit more and actually going to bigger tournaments. I remember one of the I can't remember the name of the tournament. It was a big 100-person tournament or so at some in a basement almost in Illinois, and that was where the major deck that came out of that one that was a big surprise to everybody was, I think I want to say TJ Holman played that How to Begin to This Mess deck, the one where you play the droid right away and you play 13 How to Get Into This Messes, and you just cycle the deck and play a bunch of 2-0 sites and whatever. And that was the first big tournament I went to. So it was it kind of built from there. But before that, I was playing locals and stuff like that. But that was the first big one.
So how did we get into this mess? If one of your droids is at Dune C, or where there is a scomp link, use one force to discard your entire hand to your use pile, draw the same number of cards from your reserve deck, draw one extra card if droid is C-3PO or R2-D2. So you were playing a bunch of probably Twixes or whatever, and you just get your
Oh, that was not my deck. I was playing.
Or not you, but that the deck you were talking about.
Yeah, that was the deck. Yeah, so you would. I can't. I want to say there was a card that pulled the droid first turn, and I think it was just a signal start because it was not something that was immune to alter, and you would pull. I want to say R2 or C3PO, then you would play 13 of those and that was the number that it took to like go through your whole deck in like a turn or two and get everything out. And then from there you just played, from an advantage, like almost like a hyper powered throne room start.
So it's probably Seeking an Audience.
Yes, there you go. It was Seeking an Audience that got it. Yep.
All right. Keep this in mind for some retro tournaments. Unfortunately, Seeking an Audience is Jabba's Palace sealed deck, and the retro tournament I'm preparing for is Premier to Death Star 2. So missed by a set.
Missed by a little bit, yeah.
I guess I could just play like 5 copies of the card that pulls C3PO. The interrupt. Were you looking for me? So you played, so you started, so you were really getting competitive just as the game was starting to wind down then.
Yeah, I would say, around then, right? I mean, I was in high school at the time and just playing in more and more local tournaments, starting to play, I think in some larger tournaments like that once in a while, as I could. Again, it's a little tougher when you're in high school and you're relying on other people for rides, right? But yeah, that's what I was playing. And then, I would say my first year of college was probably the year I played more than anything, which was 2001, as they were releasing a million sets and hammering out, a million cards just before the license was lost. So it was a little chaotic, but at the same time, it was, that's how I was diving in and getting decent. I would say, what was it? Probably 99, 2000, somewhere around there. I was, I had played enough locals and enough, tournaments in the area, like regionals and stuff like that, that I had gotten to, I want to say I was top 100 in the world. I think I was like number 86 or something like that by the time the license was lost.
Interesting. So just I put out a call for questions if anybody is gonna ask questions from the Slack, and Scotland Grell left a comment. He says, I miss Brandon. He was passionate and had to be because the community was just as passionate. He was a really good person to work with behind the scenes with, and I hope he is doing well. So Scotland Grell,
he was always a person that was good to play. He played the back channels really well. He was really good at like pulling people together and being the one, the adult in the room a lot of the times. And at the same time, like, I think he always knew what the right thing was to do, even if it wasn't popular. But he always knew when the right time to pull the trigger on it was, even if it wasn't as soon as I wanted it to, like the Maseratas or the resets and stuff like that. I mean, the discussions that he had with me about those things were years before they actually happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he's the boss now. So.
Oh, he was the boss back then too. So
yeah,
I'm surprised he's still that involved. I'm sure sure that maybe his wife is happier with it now than she used to be. I know he used to get crap about it.
Well, everybody finds a balance eventually. So Decipher loses the license. Do you remember where you were when you found that out, or what was going on?
I honestly don't remember exactly. It wasn't like one of those 9/11.
Was it 9/11? Yeah. I didn't mean to phrase it like that.
I remember exactly where I was. Yeah, same time, right? It was like, not too far after that, right, but it was I remember exactly where it was 9/11. What, like, the Decipher losing the license, like, wasn't one of those like major impact moments to me, other than, hey, that means there's no more official sets. Like, I didn't get heavily involved behind the scenes until a couple of years later.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, but I would say Evan Fitzgerald was probably the person that I played a lot with, and he was somewhat involved in the back end, and I'm not sure if he plays anymore. I haven't spoken to him in probably too long.
Yeah, that's
but,
not a name that I know.
Yeah, so probably not anymore. He was winding down for a while too after I want to say like 2007 or 8, but yeah, I mean it didn't really impact us that much, like because it was the same people that still kept playing. It was people were in college, like I was playing in like Madison and Rockford, Illinois, and Chicago area and stuff like that when I could, Milwaukee. And on top of that, like, there wasn't exactly an interruption in the bigger tournaments, so, like Gen Con and stuff like that still happened. So, it didn't really hit me.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of remember that too, where I mean I wasn't actively playing when Decipher lost the license, but when I first heard about like virtual cards and things, it wasn't it didn't seem, I mean it was a blow, but it wasn't it was like there still is a thing that is happening now. And actually I wouldn't be, if Decipher had kept the license, I wouldn't be playing now because I wouldn't have been able to buy a bunch of booster boxes for $20 a piece.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if Decipher didn't lose the license, I would say, at the time as a college student, it would have been a lot tougher to keep up, right? But, if I had stayed, longer after college, it'd been way easier. It would, you know what I mean? Like dispensable income and all that stuff, like, wouldn't have been a big deal. But yeah, it made the game cheaper. That was for sure. From that point forward, that was a nice bonus. That new sets coming out doesn't mean you have to go drop $300-400 to make sure you have enough. Instead, it's just make sure you have a printer with some ink in it, and you're good to go.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's ink adds up, but or especially if you have to like go to Staples or something, that 75 cents a page, that adds up, trust me.
There are some people that were obsessed with, and I'm sure there still are, the photo quality printouts. I didn't care. As long as I could read it, it didn't matter to me. Aesthetics wasn't the important part.
Well, my printer died about a year ago, so I switched over to getting stuff printed at Staples, and I'm used to the good picture quality, so I like don't want to go back.
Well, and
just because
nowadays,
it's easier to read.
right? Like I would say by the time I was getting out of it, they have the full printout ones, right, with new pictures and everything like that, right? So it's a little different than when it was started, where it was, a low quality printout of just some text and some numbers.
Yeah, it wasn't even. Yeah, I mean, it was like an MS Paint, like pretty basic, just like a flat, like a red and the thing, or the black and the text. Yeah, and it was just the half slips. So you kind of kept at it. I mean, was it just like a steady grind, or what was the run up to your win in 2004 like?
Oh man. All right. So I will say that, when I started truly getting into the game, and playing seriously around Death Star 2, my mindset switched. Like, it was one of those things where, if I'm going to play a competitive game that is heavily, strategic and player skill and based on, how much I know, right? Like if I play a card, I have to know what all possible counters are, right? So you just have to have a knowledge of like what is being played, what does a common deck look like, what could stop me, and what, plan ahead. So I was deep into it. I mean, it was it's one of those things where you think about it all the time. You're at school, you're at work, whatever. You just think about it a lot, and you try out and you try to find any competitive advantage you can, optimization. And so I played as much as I could. I would play with, friends. I would say at a certain point, like, uh, I had other friends that were in Madison when I would go there. Like this is, freshman year of college, sophomore year of college, that were also like top 100 players in the world, and that had won big tournaments, like Corey Faraday, who I would say quit probably around 2002 or 2003 to go play other games. But even during the Decipher era, he was a really good player, and I think that really helped. Like really, playing against better and better competition. Seeing what they did differently than what I was doing. But it was just repetition and learning and really just thinking way too much about it and probably putting way too much uh, brain time against it to get better. And I think my play probably improved quite a bit between I would say 2000 and 2003-ish, and then when 2004 was my first chance to go to Worlds, and I think that was really what did it, because prior to that I was winning locals. If I wasn't winning the local tournaments by 2003-ish, I was upset, or it was kind of a disappointment. So it was just that I didn't travel more than that, so I didn't really play against a lot of these other guys up to that point.
So 2004. I mean, when we're talking about, I've interviewed. Once this interview goes up, there will be 7 world champions that I have not interviewed. So I've interviewed a lot of people in a lot of different eras, and this kind of mid 2000s era is kind of considered to be like, well, especially 05 and 06 are considered to be kind of the point where maybe the game was at one of its lowest points of popularity, turnout and things, and then it kind of built back up there and then dropped back off in the before the reset, and it's been growing since then, or growing and leveled off and all this stuff. But anyway, 2004 is an interesting time to me, because obviously by 2005, 2006, you had a lot of the meta was defined by these overpowered virtual card decks. And at least my personal memory playing in like 02, 03, the meta was more defined by the stuff that was good at the end of the Decipher era. And just, people were still playing Senate and stuff. So where were we at in 2004 with the meta?
We were actually pretty close to that 2002, 2003, right? Like I won with Throne Room and Senate, I believe, right? So it was still a lot of hunt down, dark Senate. Light Senate was not good. It was a lot of like Reflections 3 cards were still the overpowered cards, right? Like Free Executor card and all that stuff was still like the basis of a lot of dark side decks with like hunt down and stuff. And so it was a lot of control, right? It was a lot of control decks that if you could own the board and you can win a couple of fights here and there, and you can and you can manipulate your resources, you can win the game. It wasn't what started hitting in 2005 and beyond, which was I'm going to put all my cards on the table and drain you out as fast as possible, and let my overpowered stuff hopefully beat your overpowered stuff, unless you get your counters, and then maybe you can win, right? Like right. It was still back in that control age, right? Where a slight misplay, the difference between winning and losing was a slight miscalculation or misplay, or a little bit of luck here and there would change the course of the game against another good player with a control deck, more than who had the strongest overpowered cards the fastest.
So obviously it was 2004 was 19 years ago. So I don't know how many details you have from that day, but do you have any stories from from your experience at Worlds?
Oh, let's put it this way. I would say day 2 of Worlds was kind of a blur. It was, you're just kind of at a bunch of big tables playing a whole bunch of games and hoping you finish high enough to make it to the next day, which I would say by the, I don't know, sixth, or probably by the time I hit the 7th game and I knew it was, I felt like I was in a really good spot. I think I don't really remember a whole lot of the games from that day. It was really day 3 that really stuck out to me. I wish I could remember who I played first on day 3. But the second person I played was Brian Hunter, right in the top 4. I remember.
Let's back up for just a second.
Yep.
So day 2. So this was, of course, I always have to preface this in case people don't remember how Worlds worked. You had to qualify. They called it day 2, and they sometimes still call it day 2, even though there is no day 1. Because we just have you play on Saturday and then top 8 on Sunday. Generally, they might be changing the format if, at other times, but anyway. So you either had to qualify prior, or you had to come a day early and play in some side events or something. Were you qualified previously?
Yeah, I was qualified previously. I want to say I won Illinois state tournament or Wisconsin state tournament. I don't remember which one, to be honest. Maybe both. I think by that time I was winning both, and it was just one of those qualify 3 or 4 different times and it just gets passed down. But yeah, I was qualified. But I was there Friday as well for one of my friends was trying to qualify for day 2 and ended up doing it. But yeah, so day 1 was Friday. I was there. I played some practice games against some people with my actual decks, right? I didn't really have anything to hide. It was, it was Throne Room and Dark Senate. It wasn't anything special. And plus on top of that, I had the benefit of even the people I was playing against, like I was an unknown at the national stage, right? I was winning locally and stuff, but nobody was like, oh, gotta watch out for that guy. So I didn't really have anything to hide for the most part.
Yeah, I've been personally dealing with that. Not that I am a good player, but I've gone from being somebody that nobody texts for to somebody that everybody knows the 2 decks that I know how to play. And so either if I go to a tournament where I am actually one of the more known players, like a local or something, then people will prepare for me specifically. Or if I'm playing in like an online event where you can change decks in between rounds, I have to be careful about that.
Yeah, I would say, and in fact, I may have even gone to Minnesota that year too for a tournament, but people knew me at least in the area by then, right? Because like between Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, there weren't, there were distances between us, but like we knew each other well enough. We would travel to each other's tournaments and play that, people would try to figure out what I was gonna play and tech against me. But like, going to Worlds was a different story, a whole different group of people. So yeah, day 2, right? I think I won. I want to say I went 6-2 that day with a decent score and made it to day 3. I don't remember what seed I was, to be honest. I think I was maybe like a 7 or 6 seed or something like that. But got to day 3 and it was top 8 at that point. So game,
top 8 was it match play or?
It was match play, right? So you play 2 games against one person and then the winner moves on, right? And so I wish I remembered who I played the first round. I want to say it was like Drew Scott or somebody like that. But I don't remember. But the next round, it was Brian Hunter. So that was, semifinals against Brian Hunter. I don't remember what happened the first game other than I won. Okay. I want to say with Dark Senate, I won the game. I don't remember what he was playing. The next game was my throne room against his deck with the free executor, and just stack it in. Basically, it was like whoever won the system won the game, because like he's just stacking everything there and slowly pinging me out, and I'm just trying to mount something to fight him.
Was
And
it a this deal is getting worse all the time?
yeah,
Okay.
I want to say it was within Hunt Down. I
Or
want to
Hunt
say it
Down?
was the Hunt Down deck
Okay.
that played that with the free executor.
Yeah. I know there have been a handful of decks that did that over the years.
Yeah,
So
and remember, this
that
is back in 2004, so like, a free executor in a deck where and Hunt Down with control, right? It was a huge advantage, and you played enough stuff to fight on the ground and control around there, around maybe one or two sites, and you played enough to control one system, and you took advantage of your free 12 force from having to, or 15 or whatever it was for
right.
executor, and you went for it, right? And you put some guys in your deck that were good pilots, that weren't total trash otherwise, and you went for it. So I remember the whole game hinged around a single fight in space, where I can't remember what starship I had. I remember that I had enough down that I was drawing 2 Destiny, and I had stacked 2 6s against the Executor, which is famously immune to less than 12.
Less than 12, yep.
And so I drew my 2 6s, and he had, I want to say, so on the ship, he had 11 forfeit, which,
Oh, wow.
right? So I drew my 2 6s, and he tried to sack his 2 guys and move on with the game. And I'm like, hold on, buddy. That's not how this game works, right?
Yeah.
It's 12. So, and then he looks at his 2 cards and pretends like, he was surprised it didn't add up to 12. And and the game turned at that point, right? It was kind of over. So, that's one of those things that kind of sticks in your head, right? Because it was like, it was the point where it won me the match. And
I'm sure that's the only time that Brian Hunter has ever done anything sketchy. Anyway, so yeah, that's really, but Brian Hunter still a great player. So you played Brian Hunter for the top 4, you got there, and then Reed Smith. Yeah, but Reed Smith, another great player. So how did that finals go?
I mean, I think, sitting down, getting past Hunter, right? Because Hunter was one of those, like, he's awkward as a person, and so like the whole match was kind of awkward, and it was always like you were kind of on eggshells, and it just kind of adds to the nerves, which may have been intentional, right? But at the same time, I'm at a stage where I had never played at this level before. I had never been at at a top 4 at Worlds. I'd never been at Worlds before, so I think beating him was a huge relief. It was interesting because it was the first time I had people truly like crowding around the game and watching the game, and like, whispering, and all I'm thinking every time that people are whispering is, where did I mess up, or what am I missing, or whatever. So it made me a little more aware of what was going on. And then, Reed Smith, I would say, he and I got along really well. So I would say it was a little more relaxed at the same time, as relaxed as you can be in your first World Championship finals. And God, what game did we play first? I want to say I played Throne Room first, and I won by like 15 or something like that, right? Some like not a huge amount, but like
enough
that
they got to play honestly, but it's probably going to be the second game that chooses that decides the match.
Yeah. So I got a terrible start with Senate, and he takes over the Senate chamber on me, and it's rough. While on top of that, he's getting a drain somewhere else, and all I'm doing is like slowly cycling through my deck, trying to find enough to like go to the Senate chamber and win a battle big enough to basically deplete him to where I can scoop and the game's over. Right?
So was he playing Light Senate or
he was playing Throne Room?
So yeah. Oh, sorry, I think you said that. So he was really ahead if he was able to invade your Senate. to the point
Yep.
that you couldn't come
He
back against
had
him.
the right cards. He was playing one or two cards that didn't have their text wiped out in the Senate, and it just kind of it gave him enough to just come in and just and beat out my initial guys, and then so that I had to do something. So I was playing the senator that made their forfeit equal to 0 if they weren't senators, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember which one it was. I swear to God, that's a card. I don't, but it was one of them. And so I was scooping for that guy, and I was scooping for enough that, hey, if I go in there, I want as much power as possible that I'm going to make him lose everything there, plus enough force that this is going to be a big enough deal that I don't have to go fight anywhere else for this game, because I'm not going to get anything else out of this, right?
Right.
And that's effectively what happened, right? I got my I can't remember what the cards are. They were effects that worked with senators that allow you to
The political
manipulate a bunch of
effects.
stuff. And I set it up well enough that I went in there and I beat him down, and I think he was under 10 force, and I just scooped, right? His hand was small enough that I knew that there wasn't anything he could do to put enough back, and I ended it that way. It was, it was, again, it's a classic control matchup. I think he was playing Throne Room. He played Throne Room, and I can't remember what his dark deck was. I want to say it was Hunt Down or something like that. So, if you haven't caught on to the theme, everybody's kind of playing control decks throughout. And to give you an idea of what the meta was like at the time, it was a lot of Hunt Down, Throne Room, Dark Senate. I wish I could remember. I want to say Hunter was playing Quiet Mining Colony for his light side deck.
I know he was playing that around that time.
Yeah, so it was a lot of control decks, and just to give you an idea, and it was exactly what what happened to me in the final there, which and even against Hunter, it was who can manipulate what you've got and strategically set up what'll get you to the win in a match play. And I really I liked match play because it gave you 2 games to really just kind of prove it out rather than a one-off whatever against a random thing. And so even if you didn't have the best matchup, you could just make it close, and then the second game you can win and move on, as opposed to if that was the way if you had a bunch of bad matchups on one side, you're 4-4 and you don't go anywhere in standard play. So in Swiss, so I think like I said in the finals, I pushed him to that point, and that's what did it in the end. I will say that the one thing that sticks in my head is I made a mistake with it didn't make a difference in the end, but there was a card that I put in my used pile that wasn't supposed to go in my used pile because somebody pointed out after the game, and I think it was supposed to go in my lost pile or whatever, but that was the one mistake I made the entire time, and it was something neither of us caught. Neither of us you're so focused in nerves and all that stuff that you just didn't think about it. It wasn't intentional. But that was it. It was one of those things where it hit me almost right away that this is what happened, and then it just kind of, but I don't even know how to describe it. It was one of those you're not surprised you won, but at the same time you're elated that you won and you were able to prove yourself, right? All of that that mental energy you put into the game over the years was a culmination to that point.
Right. Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, I haven't won worlds, but I've won games.
Yeah.
when you beat that, and I mean, I think that people consider your win over Reed Smith one of the biggest upsets in a world championship of all time. And I mean, so you really obviously you did good there. When you're playing and you feel like there's a certain feeling when you kind of rise above, or you like level up, to the next level player. So that's got to be great. So how did you get involved in design?
I think so after my win there, I was talking to Lingrel and, basically just asked, can I be a playtester? And so, he gave me access to that. And then, as conversations evolved on that side of it, and Evan Fitzgerald, I think, was an advocate at the time, or at least involved deeply on that side of it. And he was one of my friends in Madison. And so I think, that just got me more and more involved, and gave me access to more and more stuff. It was, and I think they respected that I wasn't gonna, that I was just gonna be honest, right? Like, here are the things that I see as an issue. Here are the things that, I feel are overpowered, and I'm just trying to make the game the best it can be. Obviously, it didn't work very well when it came to, like, Scum and Villainy coming out and doing all that. But at the same time, there, I'm sure there is today, but even back, especially back then with the egos involved, it was a lot of politics and, like, people trying to protect their designs and protecting, what they thought was fun. But yeah, I mean, my involvement just kind of built over time, and as I think they saw that I was passionate about it and had the time to be involved, so I think that helped.
Well, and I always say this, and I don't do it because I was a play tester for a little while, and I didn't feel like I felt I decided that I just wanted to focus on the current meta, not the next meta. And or a meta that will never exist, because if I find anything good, then they'll cut it out because it's too good. Um, but but yeah, if people do a lot of times come in and they say, how do I get into design? And they just want to get, they just want to, who do I give ideas for cards to or whatever? And it's like, that's not really how it works. But at this point, playtesting is open. Anybody can be a playtester. You just have to reach out to Stubley on the forums, and then that, if you are, of the 100 people who are on the playtesting team, a fraction of those actually really participate. And if you're one of those people that really participates in the process, then other opportunities will come up. So
I will say, so I personally wasn't designing cards. If anything, I was kind of that first level filter before it was going to playtesting. By the time, when I was involved on design, it was, hey, here's a whole bunch of stuff. And you have to, design is a funny thing, right? Like, everybody thinks they're a great designer, but at the same time, like, you don't have to be a good player to be creative and come up with good designs. But you have to be humble enough to accept the feedback that what you've got is too much, right? Like, I understand you want your ideas to work. It was just one of those, like, and it kind of got and it got the game into trouble for a little bit. It was, everything doesn't have to be automatic for your deck to work, right? Like, you don't have to create all of the cards that pull all of the cards to make your bonuses kick into play. The beauty of the game was controlling your resources and being able to get out what you need within, like, a calculable, like, amount of time, right? Like, hey, if I need these couple of cards, I've got to play a certain amount of cards that pull them, or ways to get there within a certain amount of time, and in order to get these rewards. So, like, when the balance between how easy it was to pull something off and the rewards you get for pulling it off was way off, that's just what set off, like, that bad meta. And playtesting on its own, right? Like, I've got opinions about that, which probably doesn't surprise anybody. It is of dubious value to an extent, right? Like, you're going to like you're currently playing in a regular meta, and then you've got these new cards that are trying to come out, and you're trying to build decks around it. You're trying to play some games against some friends, and you don't know if the deck you're playing against is going to be in the meta when this new stuff comes out or not. And a couple of games of whatever aren't usually indicative of how powerful it really is going to be. So it's a really like tricky proposition to truly play test and understand without like, unless it's like just way overpowered and like nothing comes close to beating it, right? Like only like those true outliers are you really going to catch in actual play testing.
I think I will say I think that you can where playtesting is actually more helpful is if you can get quantity of data. Now that we have, because playtesting works differently. Actually, you can speak to this here in a second, but the way that playtesting works now is we have a larger number of people, like anybody can do it. And they play on GEMP, which is the online version of the game, rules enforced and everything. And then send their game data to the people who actually make the decisions. And I think that helps, first of all, because you're getting real accurate data. You're not just getting a bunch of speculation, although you get plenty of speculation from the playtesters. And then also, it's a larger number. And then kind of the biggest thing about the process as it is now is it also works as like QA testing for programming the cards into GEMP.
Yeah.
So if a card doesn't do what it's supposed to do, they catch it when it's in play testing, rather than when it's available for the public or when it's being played in a tournament or something, which is a really cool thing. Plus, and then on top of everything else, it means that when the set is released, it's for physical cards, it's also available online at the same time.
Yeah, no, that's all great. Yeah, back in the day, playtesting was print the cards off, play them in person, which what did you have, like probably 20 to 30 playtesters, about less than 10 of them would say they played games. And again, they're just reporting on what they say they did, which you can easily make up to suit the narrative you're trying to spin while you're doing it, right? So it's a very different like time, and that's what I'm basing my judgment
probably
off
playing
of.
Against the same one or two people.
Yep. And they may be good players, but at the same time, you can be a good player, but you may not be the most creative deck builder with new cards, for example, right? Or you may not know how to exploit certain things, or you may be trying to manipulate the results to let cards get out so you can play what you actually found and don't want anybody to know about, right? So it was rife for abuse, which didn't help anything. And then, but that is before you get egos in play on top of that.
Right. Okay, so I do actually have a couple questions. I told people to be nice, and one person
I didn't care if they weren't, for the record.
one person says, "Do you want me to reply to this post, or do you want me to be nice?" But anyway, before I ask that, okay, well, if you want the mean version of the question, why did you want to ruin the game?
So I guess the question to that is how did I ruin the game, or how did I try to ruin the game? I guess do you have any context on that? Because I would love to know how I tried to ruin the game.
They wouldn't give me more.
Okay, so
like
at the time,
I
would say that me trying to ruin the game, I think that narrative came from me trying to errata everything overpowered, or get them banned, or try to cut down on the overpowered stuff at the time when everybody. So like, I guess the thing with overpowered stuff is that people find that stuff fun to play, right? Like it's fun to feel powerful in the game and win, right? And and it ignores the general overall meta for the game. Like you said, right? Looking back, people look at 2005 and 6 as low points in the game, and those were the cards that I was, trying to basically get rid of, right? And that was, it was always a fight, and it was, even every point after that, there was always, you can look at 2007 and 8 and 9, and there were a lot of overpowered things even then too. So, that was probably the narrative that gets fed, and of course, over the years, right, it's an easy thing to get out of proportion without any context, or I guess the facts, because again, it was how many years ago now?
Right, it was 50. It was 15 years ago. I can't remember if this was before or after we started the interview, but what I've been saying is, everybody was an asshole in 2004.
Oh yeah, we were all like in our early 20s and like didn't know any better, and
okay, but better questions. I have two I like these questions. First of all, actually, I'll first of all, Mike Pistone says hi. And he wants to know what your favorite ridiculous virtual card was.
Oh my god. Oh. Like one that was released?
However you
I
want to answer
assume
it.
so. Oh, I don't even remember enough cards to do this. I wish I did. Because at the time, it was always a running joke where, like, I would send cards that were proposed or just released or about to be released to even people who haven't played in a couple of years, and just to get them to laugh at it, right?
Yeah.
And I wish I could remember enough cards to do this. I would say, out of the standard cards, think about Reflections 3 and stuff like that. I would say the Free Executor card was just one of those, and the card that pulled the Free Executor card was just one of those, why does it need to exist? Why you need, free 15 mana card on the table at the expense of just putting a couple of cards in your deck, right? People didn't understand, I think, the efficiency of, number one, you're thinning your deck a little bit to get to the other cards that are in there, and that, so you don't have to worry about that as much. And then on top of that, you get a free 15 mana card on the table, and I don't know, and with other benefits on top of that. Like, that was one of them. But in terms of virtual cards, the Scum and Villainy stuff was always one of those ridiculous ones that I couldn't believe, got out there, where it was, it did everything. It got everything on the table immediately. There was really, unless you played a deck that straight up countered it, it was, you weren't gonna do anything with it. I would see, man, I would have to go back and look. I wish I had a better answer.
You're fine. What is your favorite thing that you accomplished as an advocate? Or you were a design advocate.
I was never an advocate.
Okay.
I think I hit the point where I probably could have asked and become an advocate.
Okay.
But I basically did a lot of stuff behind the scenes, and as advocates cycled in and out, I helped fill a lot of gaps and stuff like that. I would say my favorite accomplishment from back then was the mass erratas. That was the one thing that I was involved in, and I'm glad that happened, because it was the first step towards putting the game back on track to being what it was, versus the overpowered, 2005, 2006 era that, again, at the time everybody thought was fun as hell, or a lot of people did, but looking back, was a low point. So I think the mass erratas was the big one that I pushed for hard, and was heavily involved in. And in fact, I even pushed for some stuff to get errated even harder than it was. But went to varying success.
So first of all, you have, I assume you have not really kept up with the game. You don't look at, because I would be curious of what you would think of the current game, because I feel like in my opinion, the current game it has some of the same aspects of those 05, 06 era, but in a more balanced way. Like you talk about putting a lot of your cards on table and just duking it out. And I think the game has a lot of that now, and I think that makes the game really fun. Whereas like the kind of control strategies where nobody does anything or nobody, you just, it's more about limiting damage than causing damage, that kind of stuff. Those games are less fun than me. So I'd be curious. I mean, every once in a while somebody posts a card from 2006. Like the other day somebody posted the Aurora's Bantha that cost 1 force and added 2 to the force drains and added a battle destiny and all this other stuff for a Tusken Raiders Bantha. And like, so that stuff would be ridiculous even in today's meta, but I would just be,
so
I'd be curious how you would interpret things that were a little more modern design.
So I think what happened was, if you look back at, even when Decipher had the license between, I would say 97 to 2001, it would vary between, decks that did a bunch of things and control decks, right? And it would go back and forth, and there was probably a healthy balance between all of that stuff. And then that sentiment carried it to, 2004-ish, right? Like through then. And then, for the game to continue, right? Like those kind of decks cater to a very specific type of player. And it was, the top players love control decks because they allowed them to manipulate and beat. And this is, not meant to denigrate anybody, but like it allows better players to beat lesser players because you can control the game in a way that they aren't capable of. And you had every tool at your disposal to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But as the player base dwindles, you have less and less of those players over time. So the decks that do more stuff that play a lot of things out and make them more interactive is going to engage a whole lot more people over time, right? Mm-hmm. And it's going to get people to come back and play. It's going to keep people engaged because there's more variations of that than there are of control. Control is, what is my platform, and I'm going to play the same version of control, right? Like around a different platform. So over time, I'm not surprised that's what it went to. And it's probably way better for the game today than it was, back then. Because the diehards that loved control probably are fewer and far between these days, and probably get outnumbered. So, and again with balance, right? Like even back then, there were decks like that, like Quiet Mining Colony in 2004 played stuff on the table, and like it was around controlling stuff that you're playing battlegrounds on the table, and you're trying to play around those with some benefits. And there were a lot of decks like that even back then, that saw play. It's just that at the very top table in that top 4, there was a lot of control, and because you had, again, Reed Smith, Brian Hunter, myself, and I can't remember who else was in the top floor at the time. That's what we played. That's what that allowed us to win games that were otherwise, tougher to win. So I have no problem with it. I just, I have slight curiosity to see what you guys have these days, but there's so many cards that I'm out of touch on because I haven't, touched the game in however many years, well over a decade, that I would have a lot of reading to do.
Yeah. I mean, and that's true, but also, and I mean, this was, I'm sure, true back then. There is a percentage of the cards that are actually played. And I think that and I mean, we don't have, there's under 1,000 virtual cards that are legal. So even, which is like about half where we were at when there was the reset in 2014. And of those cards, there's a subset of them that you have to know, period, and there's a subset of them that you have to know if you're playing a given deck. But I mean, I think it's. I mean, I think it's a if you wanted to get back into it, you could. And I mean, you were a world champion, so you were pretty good at it at one point. Um, and Gemp is free.
I like the problem with the game is that there's just playing online in a thing like that. It's just not the same, right? Like, and as much as Hearthstone or something like that is a very basic like
Uh-huh.
random game that drives me. I don't enjoy playing because of how random it is. Um, like the interface between that and what GEMP and stuff like that is, it's just night and day. I like the enjoyment of that I got out of this game was playing in person with the actual cards, and like it makes it easier to keep track of things for me anyway, right?
Mhm.
Like it's easy to get distracted when you're playing on a computer screen. So I mean, if I had a local group, I'm sure that if I had a active local player base throughout the years, I probably would have played. I might even still be playing today.
What
No way of knowing for sure, but I think
what part of the country are you in?
I'm in Chicago area.
In Chicago, yeah. There's I mean, there's a few people, but not yeah. There's not an active core group there. That's true.
Yeah, and I think, and the people that I all knew, that played by me, all got out of the game. So I think all of that just kind of fed into, lack of interest, right? Like if I was going to play online, I would want to also play in person,
Yep.
and traveling halfway across the country to do so isn't the most appealing thing in the world.
Well, I mean, you're not that far from Minneapolis, and you're not that far from Indianapolis.
Oh, come on, 4 and 6 hour drives, but okay.
Hey, I drive I drive to the I'm coming from Columbus. I'm going to Indianapolis this weekend to play, and I play in Indianapolis and Pittsburgh a lot.
Okay.
And then I do have, but you're right. I do have a local group, but it is one that has just kind of just surfaced. Playing online actually kept me going.
Okay. Yeah, and to be honest with you, and I'm sure this is one of those questions that you'll get to, but you hit a point where like after I won Worlds and after, I went to Worlds a couple of more times and made day 3 years in a row and barely missed it the fourth year and won a whole bunch and then involved behind the scenes. I just kind of like hit that wall where I got burned out, and
Yeah.
it's just like the passion was gone, the interest to like continue to try to prove that I was one of the better players just wasn't there anymore. And you get, again, with people leaving the game, from my local play group, and not playing as much, and then having to travel if I did want to play, it just petered out. So like it was a natural end to it. You just you stop putting the mental energy towards it as well, and then when you're no longer as set on it anymore, just the appeal of competing just kind of goes away, right? Because if you're going to compete, if you were a former world champion, you kind of want to prove that you could still be at that level. You don't want to go in and just half-ass your way to the middle of the pack.
Nobody's going easy on you. There's no, like Sir Mix-a-Lot said, there's no number zero. We'll go ahead and transition. The last part of the interview is what I call the Pivo questionnaire, based on James Lipton's Inside the Actors Studio. I asked these questions to all of my Star Wars CCG and Star Wars CCG adjacent guests. Just, are we going to go through, interpret the questions however you want? The only thing is some of the questions mirror each other. So if I ask you a thing that you like, don't say not the thing I don't like.
Okay.
I think there's enough negatives in that sentence. So like I'm going to ask you your favorite card. Don't say anything but such and such, and then that's your least favorite card, because it's going to be your favorite card and then your least favorite card and so on.
Okay.
So first question, what is your favorite card?
Oh, wow. I would probably have to say the Dark Side Senate, either Senate Objective is probably my favorite, just because like there was just so much going on and so many ways to manipulate the way the game was, played and what you could do for strategy that either objective.
That's really that's always favorite cards are always interesting because favorite cards and least favorite cards. Some people would say that would be their least favorite card.
Oh, I'm sure it is. Like anybody who, and you know what? It was always funny because people hated those and whatever, and it was because and I don't blame anybody, but like if you lost to it a lot or you couldn't play it as well as other people, I totally understand why it would make somebody hate that card.
What is your least favorite card?
Honestly, I would probably have to say like the stuff that when you got to like Darth Maul and Qui-Gon with lightsaber built in all in one card, like in terms of like physical cards, and then virtual cards, like they're probably all errated or no longer exist. So like I'll just stick to like the actual cards. So it was either one of those two, just because it was like I was such a representative power creep, or the free executor card. Like those are just like cards that just I don't think ever needed to exist, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, the free executor card, they must ever and leave their city. In particular, there's a handful of these of the Reflections 3 cards that are just like, why does it do that? Like that's not how the game works. Like
Right.
either they do something like that's ridiculous. It took me like years to realize that it's because the executor is at Bespin. That's why you can deploy the executor for free at Bespin in Empire Strikes Back. But it's like it's not really that important that the executor is at Bespin. Like why would it be?
The reality is that Decipher was throwing cards out there as a money grab because they piled out so many sets, that last year because they knew they were losing the license. And so if they print overpowered stuff, then odds are people will buy more of it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. For me, the most egregious one of those is Princess Leia Organa, or not Princess Leia Organa, Leia Rebel Princess. The Leia that just makes it so if all you have are aliens, you have nobody there. She blanks the ability of all your aliens.
Oh,
and then she also cancels 4 strains.
There was one of the Darth Mauls or Darth Signuses or something does that too.
Yeah, Darth Maul was if they're below a certain ability. But he cost like 6 or 8, or he cost 6 or 8 depending on where you deploy him, and like you're probably at that point playing a deck that has characters that fit that description. Like it's not just completely turning off your whole deck unless you build around this specific card the way that
I will say that back in the day that card would shut down certain decks and certain strategies, right? Because there weren't a ton of cards that were ability greater than 3 in order to turn him back off, right? So it was if you were trying to play without any of the main characters and because there were a lot of decks out there that were trying to do strategies like that, trying to be creative. He was not fun to play against.
Right. Yeah. In that time, I guess since then ability that we've had some power creep.
Oh, believe me, I am aware. Like that was not something that was something that everybody wanted their card to be ability 4 or more, because otherwise that was the only way to ensure that it had a shot of being played.
Yeah, but Leia Rebel Princess 20 years later is still really frustrating. As somebody I'm the guy that plays the scum decks. What types of cards stimulate your creativity?
I guess it was just like stuff that that just gave me more tools to control the game. It was a lot of stuff that maybe pulled a card or two that that may unlock a new strategy here and there. And I know I've already like belabored cards that pull everything in your deck and put it out and give you all the bonuses. But as cards came out that that allows you to like cycle through your deck in different ways, or or stack your deck, or unlock like ways to pull certain locations, or underplayed cards that were strong but just didn't see play because there was no reliable way to get like a 2-card combo out or something like that. I think those are the ones that really did it. I would, especially if there was a way to like cycle through a deck or something like that, it would just unlock, um, new ideas on what ways can I use this to build a better control deck, or a bit, a better strategy around things. So I wish I had good examples, but again,
it's been 19 years or whatever.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's been a long time. I mean, I think, the last time I played was probably 13 years ago or something like that, right? I mean, I'm sure you could just go look on the forums when my last post was, and that was probably around the last time I played.
What types of cards made you want to quit the game?
Oh, it was literally the like ridiculous benefits, put everything on the table, like just, and I think, like the Scum and Villainy deck was a perfect example of it, right? Where like I don't know, there's gonna be some people that remember back then, but there was the cards came out and there was an obvious version of the deck that everybody is playing, and then I found a more, and I'm not sure if other people had it at the same time, but like I was one of the first to have a more, I guess, streamlined, stronger version of it with a different combination of cards. And again, just trying to make the best of a bad situation, right? If everybody, it's the strongest deck, you got to play the strongest deck. Um, but like the decks that just, pulled everything and gave you ridiculous bonuses, and it forced you to interact with it on their level, but you were always at a disadvantage. Like those are the ones that just like it took the fun out of the game because it was so strong. Like I understand like decks that want to play their own game plan and want to do that, but you can't make them so strong that you can't interact with them, and it makes you completely abandon your own game plan just because their game plan is so much stronger than yours, right? Like if you're going to make a deck like that, this is where balance comes into play, and hopefully that's what exists today. But at the time, like there was always a lot of times there was one or two super strong decks that either your deck had to be built directly to counter it, or it had to beat it at its own game, and that was it, right? Those are the ones that really did it.
What is your favorite Star Wars term?
Oh man, can you give me an example?
I don't know. People interpret this question all over the place. Like I said, some of the questions don't make sense, but like some people will say like a term from the game. Some people will say like just like some kind of slang associated with the community. Some people will say a quote from the movies. Whatever, however you want to interpret it.
Oh, I honestly I don't really have one. It's like if I was still playing, maybe I would have one, but since I'm not like super deep into Star Wars fandom or anything like that, I really don't have one, to be honest.
Any mechanics that you like that you thought were particularly like that you like the were nothing that you use from you don't use attrition in your day-to-day life or anything?
No, no, no. I mean, I wish I did, but like just the thing that always pulled me back to to this game, and like why no other game has ever compared, is just like the way you manipulate your force, your life force in this game is unparalleled, right? Like every other game has a level of luck that just, and this game had luck, but there were so many ways to minimize that luck that no other game that I'm aware of has. And so, you know, when they say that this is strategy game, this was the peak of it, right? It was the most difficult, but also like the one where I would say skill won out. So I wish there was a specific term for all of that, but I mean that was it.
Okay. What opponent's deck would you love to see?
Oh, uh, um, honestly, like if I'm playing control, any deck that was hell bent on just like putting out a bunch of battlegrounds and trying to control them was the best, because that means they think that they get to dictate the terms, but really I get to dictate the terms of every engagement as a control deck, right? Like those were I love seeing them because it let me play my game while they tried to play theirs.
Okay. What opponent's deck would you hate to see?
Any of the overpowered stuff from 2005 and 6.
Okay.
um, but beyond that, it was like any of the stuff that basically took advantage of anything that I thought was overpowered. So like, I mean, back in the day, it was like Hunt Down that played the free executor or whatever, just because it was one of those like either you just let it be there and do its thing, or you had to go play it, fight it on its term at a massive disadvantage for how much force it was going to cost you to fight it versus what they invested into it, right? So a deck like that, or a deck that focused on just a single battleground and stuff like that. I think that was tough. It kind of just took the fun out of the game a little bit.
What Star Wars job would you like to try? And again, interpret this question however you would like.
Star Wars job? Oh,
yes,
none of them. It's a miserable universe full of like constant, oppression and like whatever. There's no winning.
Is there a Star Wars job that you would particularly want to avoid?
Oh, I mean, anything within the Empire, I think is a safe one. But also, I mean, I think anything being on either side of that war would be the one to avoid, right? Like,
there's lots of casualties on both sides.
Yes, there's no winning. Like in both sides, you're at significant risk of just dying at any point, right? What fun is that?
Right. You're right. It is a very, at least what we see of the universe is very very violent. You could just be minding your own business, and because of some political radicals, the government just decides to blow up your planet.
Well, or in the case of like some officer wants to take control of a planet, so he's going to come down with a force and just like, even though you're under control of the Empire, he wants to come in and really like milk it for all it's got.
Right, make it
as you see in some of the shows that come out now, right?
Yep, definitely. What would you like to see with the future of the game?
I mean, I not being involved for as many years as I have been, I just, it's good to hear that somebody like, Scotland Gorilla is still at the top and still in charge. And, I'm glad that, he's been successful at that, and hopefully with a better life balance as a result of it and not stressing too much about it. But just, people still playing the game. I would love to see, more active player base and it to go back to the way it was, but that those days are gone. I mean, just being realistic, but it's good to hear that there's an online tool to play games and that tournaments still exist and that people still play, and it's gotten more the community heavily involved in the way cards are being developed and played and stuff like that. I guess if I had to ask for one thing, it would be just like a super high-end online interface to play the game. Would be probably the coolest thing that you could add at this game that is the closest to realistic without it being an actual realistic thing because of the money it would cost to do.
Have you seen the upgraded beta interface for GEMP?
I have not, no.
Okay, yeah, it's I would say it is. I mean, personally, I like the vintage, like looks like a game from 1995 look of GEMP, but I know that I'm weird. But there is a beta version that is a lot closer to like a what a modern card game would look like.
So I don't blame you for liking that. If you grew up on that version of it, of course you're going to favor that. I just have like nightmares playing on the old versions of that from like the early 2000s.
Yeah. Okay. I got a few people are posting in the thread with where I asked for questions about you, but I'm seeing if anybody asked any good questions. There's a few bad questions.
By all means, you can ask
But,
whatever question you want because you can cut out whatever you want. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
really
that's
care.
that's true. That's true too.
And I'm curious, like, and if anybody talks shit, by all means, share it. I'm actually curious how much people still care about me.
Well, let's see. So, okay, well, actually, I did mean to ask this question. What's something that you achieved while you were volunteering and stuff that you hope lasted?
I would say transparency was one thing that I preached, and I think that anybody that remembers back when I was involved on the back end, that I tried to be as transparent as possible out to the public, right? Because this was before everybody was playtester and knew what was going on behind the scenes. Yeah. I always try to be as transparent as possible. So I hope, I mean, it sounds like transparency has improved over time, because at one point they tried to keep it, a little private, and, people tried to take control, with their power and stuff like that. But then also just like the level of cards being at a more reasonable level, and if it ever hits a point where it's just too much, don't be afraid to do a mass errata or another reset or something like that, because as you said, there's what, over 1,000 virtual cards at this point. It becomes untenable to like maintain all of that stuff and all of the interactions.
It's not quite. I don't think it's quite 1,000. I think it's I want to say like 800 or something, but it's a number.
Yeah.
But it's I think it's a lot more manageable than it was in Legacy, and also they're designed better than they were in Legacy. They have less text than they had, and they're,
oh my god.
And as
by
someone
the way,
who has
when you have to shrink the text to half the size it used to be in order to fit it onto a card, and then shrink the picture on top of that, or cover up half the picture, you have too much text on the card. It's doing too many things.
Yeah. I've had some player design cards that I've been involved with, and they're very strict with text limitations, and I think that
that all stemmed from back then, because it was bad.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I still have some. Let's see. And then somebody asked, what's your favorite Dallas Cowboys moment for the past 23 years? That's Aglet's asked.
Well, whoever asked that knows that I'm a Cowboys fan, so they're giving me crap. Let's see, what would be the best one from the past 23 years? I could go with the Tony Romo fumble on a field goal, or the Des Bryant catch that was ruled a non-catch. That then was later said, oh yeah, that was probably actually a catch. Let's see. I don't know. There's so many great disappointments to choose from.
All right. I think that's I think that'll do. We'll end it with a little sports talk. You're probably the first person to bring up sports on a podcast that I've ever made in my life, but I'm not a sports guy. But I really appreciate you doing this. This was really a lot of fun, really interesting perspective. That time in the game when you were involved is definitely a very specific time in history. One of the reasons that I am doing these interviews is that I feel like there's a lot of kind of communal knowledge about the history of the game that isn't documented anywhere. So just having a podcast where you were there and you're talking about your time there, really I think makes a difference. There's a decent amount of information from like the Decipher era, and there's a decent amount of information from like the last 5 years, but that kind of that early PC era, there's just not a lot of stuff, unless we go on archive.org and hope that the Deck Tech forums still are there.
Does Deck Tech still exist? It doesn't exist anymore,
it does. No, it doesn't. Actually, decktech.net, I believe, forwards to the PC site now.
Okay, because Neil Rotzi is a whole nother story, but I don't know if we need to get into that one.
All right. Well, we'll leave it. We will leave it at that. Thanks everyone for listening. Until next time, good luck, have fun, and no reverts. This podcast is a production of the KendallCast Podcast Network. If you'd like to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/KendallCast or make a direct donation through the PayPal link at kendallcast.ninja. Thanks for listening.